My superpower in life is my network. And I'm always introducing people, connecting people, like not knowing or wanting something in return. I believe in karma. I'd know nothing better than to get my hands dirty and help these companies and add value and use our network. And if you talk to the vast majority of our portfolio companies, they would say, the value we've provided is second to none on the cap table. I'm an operator at heart, and that's what I like to it. In normal business, you look at something and you say, okay, why is this going to fail? What could go wrong? In venture, you have to sort of flip that on its head and say, okay, what if everything goes right?
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. Building on your own is hard to say the least, and finding the right investors in your field can be just as difficult. You want a partner who truly understands what you're going through and can help you make the best decisions for the business, knowing that they've had those types of experiences themselves. Today's guest is exactly one of those unicorn investors and is always looking out for the next thing in food and CPG. Please welcome founder and managing partner of Barrel Ventures, Nate Cooper. Nate, hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm so happy you're on. I've loved your work from afar for a long time now, so I'm really excited for folks to hear from you today and everything you've been up to with Barrel. Let's take things back to the beginning. I always loved from the start. When did you first fall in love with food? What was eating like for you as a kid? What were some of those favorite foods?
So I grew up in this industry. My family's been in food forever. And I don't have like one moment where food like struck me as I wanted to do this. It was more of like, hey, I don't want to do this because it's everything my family's done.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just in my blood, and you kind of gravitate towards what you know and what you've seen. And I tried working in finance for 6 months out of college, and that didn't work. And then I joined the restaurant world.
Amazing. Where did you go right then?
I helped start a restaurant called Light Kitchen.
Oh, love life. So tell us about those days, starting something up. And especially as it came to the Midwest, I just remember it was finally one of those healthy choices that you could see in what was considered a chain restaurant and something that had a little bit for everyone.
Yeah. So, started the restaurant and opened the first store in Palo Alto, which I would say affected my desire to go into entrepreneurship. Given that Palo Alto, with Apple and Google and all those things, it's kind of the mecca in Stanford.
Yes.
And life, like you said, it kind of had something for everyone. I think that was one of its selling points and also one of its downfalls. We try to be everything to everyone. You're not known for one thing. And I think we try to do too many things. Yeah, ultimately.
Yeah. I think that is always so tough. I mean, I think about that even from the marketing angle of things, oh, you should be on every single channel because it's there. But if it doesn't really work for you or your audience or just your mission, then it just feels like you're doing everything, but not super well.
Exactly.
So what kind of role were you playing when you were at Life? You tested out finance, you were out in the Bay Area.
Yes. I joined the company when it was two guys and an idea. I helped them raise money, jump at the restaurant, opened the first few stores, working in the restaurant. And then we became a franchisee and opened them in Chicago.
Holy cow. So it brought you back to Chicago. You're from the area originally. What did you end up doing from there? Were you starting to have inklings that you wanted to start something of your own? Or were you still focusing on, okay, here I am. I'm part of the food business now.
I started to have inklings that if I stayed in restaurants any longer, I was going to have a nervous breakdown. So
Really?
I decided to go back to business school
Okay.
and take a break from food. And of course, I started running their food business.
Yes, you did. So you went to Kellogg. What was it about Kellogg specifically that helped you really get ready to be a founder yourself?
So I went to Kellogg and was invited to speak at Kellogg at like their Food and Ag Week, probably 8 months before I started. And I was starting the next year, and talked about my history and the family history, and talked about that kitchen. And I got an email after from someone who said, "Hey, I've got this idea. Kids hate their lunches; their parents pack them. Parents hate packing their kids' lunches. I want to start a restaurant." Which Rebecca. And we had coffee, and my response was, "Interesting idea. Don't start a restaurant. Like, maybe there's another way to start a business." Restaurants are really freaking hard.
They are.
It is one of the hardest businesses in the world. Pretty much every other business you can build on something every single day, right? A
Yes.
restaurant, you start over every single day. Like you start from zero.
Yeah.
And it's hard, right? You're expected to deliver a incredible experience. And if you deliver that great experience, they might not tell anyone about it. But if you deliver a subpar experience, they're going to tell everyone about it.
100%. And it's just so grueling physically, in addition to all the mental stress you're feeling.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more. You sat down with Rebecca. This is Rebecca Sholaton Conweiler we're talking about, who has been such a good friend and just mentor to myself when I also was going through the wild ups and downs of attempting my own startup. So she had just come out of what became Wise Apple. As you two started to work together as co-founders, how did the idea of Wise Apple then develop into what became the prepackaged foods and actually working on a CPG product?
Yeah. So we had this idea to solve this pain problem that parents were having about packing their kids' lunch. And we posted something on Facebook expecting to get a few responses and ended up getting hundreds.
Wow.
And it kind of took off from there. I think by the time I finished Kellogg, we had about 40 or 50 employees. We had raised millions of dollars. We were doing, a few $1 million a year in revenue. I'm not sure why Kellogg let me graduate because I was barely in school. And, unfortunately, the business didn't work out for a variety of reasons, but wouldn't be here today without that experience, by all means. And I think we were solving a really unique problem that someone is going to solve at some point.
Yes,
It still needs to be solved, but it's a really hard problem to solve.
it is. So tell me a little bit more about that. Was this before you had had kids as well?
Yeah. Not
So both of you didn't have kids at the time. No, you both do. But you were seeing this problem with friends, with family, just trending within the consumer space that parents have trouble packing their kids' lunches, making them actually healthy, and making it something that the kid wants to eat on the other end here. So you mentioned that you were doing some really great customer discovery in terms of just reaching out and figuring out what exactly are the pain points here. You mentioned, unfortunately, Wise Apple did have to close, as sadly many ventures do, but it gave you guys a great foundation for the future. What would you say worked really well for that particular business when you were operating? And what were those biggest challenges that you saw for that particular business problem, or just how you went about it that time around?
things that worked well. I think if there's anything that, you look for a product that can go viral and share, right? And if there's anything that people want to share with one another, it's how do I make my crazy lives revolving my kids easier? I've learned
Yes.
as a parent now. So I think that really worked. Solving a unique pain point that is universal. Really, really interesting and works. One thing that was challenging about that business is when you're serving kids, you have this finite time period of them as customers, right? So let's say between the ages of like 4 and 10, and you're constantly having to recycle and get new customers and customer acquisition versus if you have a consumer product, right? Like I see Graza behind you, you
Yes.
probably start cooking.
My favorite.
You probably start cooking as a college student and buy Graza, right? And you can be a customer of that for the rest of your life.
And so you were seeing that, couldn't be a repeat customer for as long as you wanted here. Were you seeing anything from the manufacturing side of things, from the recipe testing side of things that was
Manufacturing
interesting?
A fresh food product I don't recommend it to anyone. Incredibly challenging. We were making our own product in our own factory. I think at one point, we had worked like 150 days straight
Oh my goodness.
in the factory
Yeah.
that many days. But sometimes really hard problems to solve are really hard to solve for that reason, right? And the people who solve them
Right.
are going to make a lot of money. Really great businesses.
Totally. What do you think would take that business to the next level if you were to try it again, or if you were to back someone who is trying this?
Somehow making the product shelf stable would be something I would suggest. That'd be the first thing that I'd do. Non-refrigerated or doesn't need to be refrigerated. I think a product that doesn't need to be refrigerated but is merchandised in fridges is really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm excited to see who tackles it next year. And I'm sure they would come to you and be like, hey, are we doing this right? So that business ended up wrapping up in about 2018, correct?
Yeah.
Tell us about how Barrel Ventures started from there. When was that time period in between? And what really sparked the impetus of let's go on the investor side? Let's take a little bit of what you've done already in the past and put it into one great fund here.
Yeah, so I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. Obviously, Wise Apple shutting down was a emotional, heartbreaking experience.
Yeah.
Like I said, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I said, look, I see this incredible amount of deal flow, just given my history and the family history. Maybe I'll spend some time, write a check or two, and figure something out. I started looking at deals. And the first real check I wrote was in August of 18 into this crazy idea that you guys had to start a soda company, which was Olipop, before they did $1 in sales.
Holy cow.
And, things happen for a reason, I guess.
Yes. How did you come across Olipop? How did they find you? And what specifically about the product or that team made you say, yeah, that could be something worthwhile?
So it took me a while to realize this. My superpower in life is my network. And I'm, always introducing people, connecting people, like not knowing or wanting something in return. And so I believe in karma. I was introduced to someone who introduced me to Olipop through a business school professor. And I had David Lester, one of the founders, over for dinner. And I remember he walked in and he's a Brit, and my wife didn't understand a word he said. And she goes, I made chicken. And he goes, I'm vegan. And so she looked at me, she goes, we're starting off with the wrong foot there.
Oh, no.
And he left, and the product and brand looked identical to what it does and tasted identical to what it does today, apart from like a few little tweaks.
Wow.
But they had the vintage cola, they had the ginger lemon, they had the strawberry vanilla. And I tried it and closed my eyes, and I thought I was drinking a Diet Coke. And I've told this many, many times, but my wife told me it was disgusting and not to invest. So never had forever. But I sort of looked at it from two angles. One was you've got kombucha, which, had become a $1 billion category that millions of people like myself would love to drink for
Yes.
the functional benefits. And on the other hand, you've got soda, which is the biggest category in the world in consumer, that tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people want to stop drinking, but don't because it's addictive and nothing had really filled that gap. And this was sort of that white space where the light bulb went off. And it was coming at it from both those angles, and it's exceeded everyone's wildest expectations, I would say.
It's just rocket shipped.
Yep.
And so you didn't know it at the time that, of course, it would do as well as it did. What then sparked you to say, hey, I didn't just write a check or two. I actually want to do this full time and be sourcing companies that I can really build out a really interesting consumer focused portfolio and get the folks in food a boost.
Yeah. So started talking to friends in venture, and nobody would hire me, which thankfully they didn't. I think
Right.
one of the reasons I've had some success in this world is because I didn't have the traditional training, right? I hadn't been investing in companies, and I'd know nothing better than to get my hands dirty and help these companies and add value and use our network. And if you talk to the vast majority of our portfolio companies, they would say, the value we've provided is second to none on the cap table, just because I don't know any better, right? I'm an operator at heart, and that's what I like to it.
Yes. You like to get in there. And it's so difficult when you've been on the other side of those conversations and you are talking to an investor and they're like, I know this about the market. And you're like, okay, cool. But have you ever done this type of job before? Or have you been in this space before? So you really provide that awesome background here. Talk to us about building a fund from the ground up, especially out of the Midwest. So again, we've got big food out of the Midwest, but historically, when we're talking about investments, especially in Chicago, investors don't really love consumer brands that much there. I remember it being very difficult. A lot of other folks I know it's been difficult. So what made you recognize the need for this and really to push specifically from the Midwest?
Yeah. So the smartest thing I did, first lesson I learned, was if you're known for everything, you're known for nothing. And so sort of said, look, what we know better than most is the broader food world. So I say pre-farm,
Yes.
the post-work, and everything in between. So ingredients, packaging, supply chain, brands, technology, food tech, ag tech. If you're building something in that space and we can understand it and we can add value, we'll take a look at it, which is a lot. I think people in the Midwest tend to understand tangible things, and food is, very tangible, and they can understand it. It's the only thing every human being on the planet interacts with multiple times a day. It's the biggest industry in the world. I think it's also the most underfunded.
Yes.
And so there's endless opportunity, literally endless opportunity. And so people get that. It's easy to conceptualize.
Yes. What have you seen the biggest changes post pandemic? So you started working on this right before good old March 2020 hit.
Yep.
What have you really seen change in the last 5 years? And then this year alone's been crazy. If you want to talk about the biggest differences you've had to see for your current portfolio companies and what they've been dealing with.
Yeah, I think fast forward 8 years ago, 7 years ago, sort of had this thesis that the distrust of the large legacy brands is only going to accelerate. And I think that's accelerated post COVID. I think that the adoption of technology in the legacy brands will increase. I was never a believer in the fake meats and the curated meats. And I don't think the market was as big as everyone ever said. I think it's really cool that some of the biggest exits in CPG had come from Chicago, mainly RX Bar and Simple Mills and things like that.
Yes.
One of the challenge with this industry is that in food and beverage, CPG, it's all about consolidation, right? The small emerging brands get built and then they get bought and sold off to the big conglomerates. There has not yet been the emergence of like a new public company that could be the upstart for these brands. I think Chobani, knock on wood, is becoming that.
Right.
It'll be interesting in what they do, but that's one thing I'd love to see more of. Like more Chobanis, more companies like saying, hey, we want to build a conglomerate, like a new age conglomerate. What else is interesting? I think the rise of GLP-1s has been fascinating. And everyone has predicted, it's going to be the end of food. I have a different take.
What is it? What do you think?
So at the core of what GLP-1s do is decrease addictive behaviors, right? And so, what GLP-1s is doing, food is into eating for a lot of people is an addictive behavior. But at the end of the day, people still have to eat to survive. And so, I think the impact on food is going to be much slower and gradual than people suspect. I think the impact on alcohol is going to be much more severe than people suspect. And I think we're starting to see that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think even before this year, when food pricing and tariffs started to come into play in terms of how people consume food and beverages, especially alcohol. But in the last few years, Gen Z has really gone against the grain and they're not as interested in alcohol because they're able to take a look at it and say, no, that's poison. Let me not start using that in my social settings. So I do want to talk about another beverage that you are invested in, and that's experiencing a lot of change right now. You have invested in a THC beverage brand, and more of them have been on the rise. But in the last week or so alone, since we're talking here, some big policy plays have come into fruition. What's going on? Why do you see that as a potential future here? And what are you worried about now?
So I'm someone I've never smoked a joint. I've never eaten an edible. So
Really?
and something in this category for me was getting over a big hurdle.
Yes.
I'm 38. I have 3 kids. I collect whiskey. If I have a drink, I feel like shit. I don't sleep. I wake up the next morning horribly. And so the Holy Grail is something that, can give you the similar buzz to alcohol without waking up, gives you good night's sleep without waking up hungover. And that's where I think these MTHC beverages slide in. You go to a liquor store or grocery store in states where they are illegal right now. A couple months ago, they had one shelf. Now they have entire aisles. I've never seen a category take over this much space this quickly in my life. And if you talk to the people in these stores, they will say that the industry is blowing past their wildest expectations. That being said, there was just this ban, which goes into effect 365 days from now, snuck into the government reopening bill. I will say that the industry was desperate for regulations. There are a lot of bad actors. There's synthetics. There's flour. Some states you don't even need to be 18. Some states it's 21. It's sold in corner gas stations, etc. The retailers are fully on board. The distributors are fully on board. The alcohol companies, beer, wine, and spirits, if they are intelligent, which all of these people are, let's put myself in their shoes. I've got industry headwinds that aren't going anywhere. right? It's GLP-1s, it's behavior change, it's wearables, it's health, people more conscious about what alcohol is, etc. And
Yeah.
in an industry where, a good year used to be 5 to 10% growth is now 1% or negative growth, right? I think I saw, some alcohol companies, their sales are down 5, 8% shipments. I don't think that's coming back.
No.
Take it back. I would bet a lot of money that's not coming back. And so if I'm them, I would say these THC drinks, this is where I'm going to recoup some of my growth from, right? And so what I think is going to happen in the future is that my prediction, everything besides beverage goes back to dispensaries or is banned. There will be a cap on the dosage as there is on alcohol. There will be an age gate. You have to be 21 plus. And this will be treated like alcohol, put in the 3-tier distribution system, taxed like alcohol, distributed like alcohol, you name it. I think that solves a lot of the issues. It's not perfect, but I think it's the way forward for this industry.
I could definitely see that because, think about the last 10 years alone when marijuana was finally recreationally legal in those first few states like Colorado. And, it took until last year, I think, for Ohio to get on board here. So I have a feeling it's still that stigma of, oh my gosh, it's this drug, it's this bad drug. But a lot of things in our lives are drugs, like caffeine and sugar. So I think 365 days is a lot of time. A lot of things can happen, as we've seen. So fingers crossed for you too, and for everyone else in the space.
In my view, my take is that if this remains legal, I think this will be a $10 billion category within 5 years. In Minnesota, the category is making up 20% of their liquor store sales in some stores.
Incredible. Incredible. Yeah. And I could see that, again, this was so weird to me when we moved to Ohio last year grew up in Illinois, went to school in California, came back to Illinois, have never thought when I became of age to buy alcohol that I'd have to go to a specific place because everywhere else won't sell hard alcohol. It's under lock and key still. So I could see maybe that's the way that it goes when it comes to maybe these more conservative states and things along those lines. What else has been growing over time for you? What else are you seeing within Barrel specifically that you want to talk about and that you want to shout out?
We're seeing a lot of really exciting stuff in the software front on using AI for very specific vertical tasks within the industry. So we've got a couple of them called Confido and one called Iris, which are both doing really, really exciting things.
What have portfolio companies needed from you more in 2025 than ever?
Finding great people.
Just in terms of folks who have work ethic or who have the right background for these type of industries. There's a lot of shifts in, how the workforce is going about these days as well.
I'm a fan of being in the office, right? I'm a team of one, and I go into the office every day. I think it's really important to build a culture. I don't think that's the only way. Look at Olipop.
Right.
It's a multi-billion-dollar business. They've got 250 employees. They don't have an office, which is shocking to me.
Incredible. Wow.
Mind-blowing. But I'm a fan of being in the office.
It makes sense too. Post-pandemic, we're a couple of years out. It's good to be back in person together and collaborating.
I also have 3 kids under 5, so working from home is not very productive for me.
Holy cow. Yeah, you've got your own team that you're managing when you come home. So a few other questions before we get to the world's best and hardest question here. What do you think most people don't understand about building a company within food or CPG?
A lot of people think everyone needs to like it, right?
Yeah.
Again, you don't have to be everything to everyone. At the best restaurants in the world, people leave a linea and say, that meal was disgusting, that was horrible, right? And the vast majority of people leave a linea and say, what the hell just happened? That was the most mind-blowing experience.
Yes.
And so not everyone needs to love your product. I think it's one thing that I would say.
And really focus on the niche small audience that's going to come back over and over again and, find their people and spread the word to those same people.
Yep.
What would you say have been the hardest moments for you and building the portfolio that you've faced and have overcome to today?
Hardest moments for me. I think in venture specifically, the losers fail much quicker than the winners succeed.
Yeah.
Middle-aged Jewish anxiety, that doesn't work really well for me. or like it doesn't vibe with my personality. But I think one thing for me that's been hard, I get better as the older I get, the more I do this. In normal business, you look at something and you say, okay, why is this going to fail? What could go wrong?
Yeah.
In venture, you have to sort of flip that on its head and say, okay, what if everything goes right? Because in hindsight, take Olipop, for example, there are a million and one reasons why I shouldn't have invested and written that first check. And I sent it to 30 people and they all said no. Ooh. But like in the back of my brain was like, okay, what if this goes right? It could be big. I never imagined how big it could be. And the other thing is like your biggest winners will exceed your wildest expectations for how big they can be. Those are some things that have stuck with me.
Yeah. And hopefully when you stick it out and you keep pushing forward, that yes, if you're looking at just the balancing of the portfolio at the end of the day, that the winners, far exceed what happened for the folks who unfortunately couldn't make it this time around. Tell me what you're most proud of. What would you like to start working towards for the future? What do you think is really next for 2026?
What am I most proud of? When I started this, I sort of said, hey, I want to build a firm that's known as like one of the best in the space. And I'm most proud of, like, if you ask our portfolio CEOs, say, hey, what has Beryl done for you? Most of them would say, like, the value they have added is second to none.
And just coming from your own experience, that wouldn't be found elsewhere. So, before we get to the world's best and hardest question here, what's one piece of advice that you'd like to give anyone who's starting any sort of business of their own, and the best way that they should be approaching investors?
The best way that you should be approaching investors. Go back to like applying to business school. Each college or each business school had their own special essay of like, why will you fit in here? Why do you want to go here? And so I tell people like, approach each investor a little bit differently. Tailor the presentation, tailor the ask to like something that's very specific to them. People appreciated it and it'll make them like more curious about what you're doing.
Right. Do your research. What's one piece of advice, narrowing it down out of the many, that you would give anyone who's looking to be an entrepreneur, whether it's in food, CPG, or any other industry?
My first piece of advice would be don't. I think being an entrepreneur is really freaking hard. It's lonely. Everyone's going to tell you your baby's ugly. It's like exhausting. It's anxiety. Like there are so many reasons not to do it. However, if you are crazy enough and have enough loose brain cells, like most of us entrepreneurs, like get ready for a wild, fun ride and just constantly like one day you get punched in the face and the next day the best thing, like it's an absolute roller coaster.
Percent. For real. Sometimes you get punched in the face and have the best news in the same day or the same hour. All right, Nate. So a little reminder for folks, this is called the Perfect Bite because it's a perfect bite of the folks who are bringing value to the food and beverage chain, but it's also because we all have our own perfect bites, a recipe you grew up with, a dish you had, a memory of food that you'll never forget and always makes you smile. So Nate, what is your perfect bite?
My perfect bite, I have two answers, or three, I guess. And
It's hard to choose one.
very strange, not what you're going to expect. One, I forgot what the hotel was called, but probably a decade ago, I had oatmeal at this hotel in South Carolina that was like life changing. It was like the best oatmeal I ever had. Two, I had one of these like caramel apple pies baked in a bag. Like this place in Wisconsin, I forget what it was called, but I think it's on Good Belly. It was the best. Like I had a bite of it and I was like, this is the best apple pie I've ever had. And three, the only place I've ever been like absolutely blown away, I went to Aviary and like had some cocktails there a few years ago. And I walked out of there and I was like, what just happened? Like that was the most mind-blowing culinary experience. And I don't even think we ate, we just drank.
Yes. The perfect sip.
Yeah.
No, Aviary is always tops. And have you been to the Office Below?
Yes. Incredible.
I was going to say, as a whiskey lover,
Yeah.
like they are right up your alley. Oh, you're making me want to just get back to Chicago right now.
Back.
We're coming. We're coming. We're always around. Nate, thank you again so much for your time today, your wisdom, everything that you're doing here in the venture space for food. Can you let folks know where to find you? So any social accounts, the website, partners, Anywhere else we can follow along?
Email nate@barrelvc.com. I'm open. I'd love to chat.
All right, everyone, get ready, Nate, because people are going to be emailing you away from here. Thanks again, everyone, for listening in. And this was Nate Cooper's Perfect Bite.
Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.